Today we're talking about how Sea of Thieves and Summit revived each other. Or maybe not quite that, that's a bit over the top, but the symbiosis between the two. And also how Sea of Thieves has developed since we last looked at it, which is quite a while ago now, and a look into the future of Sea of Thieves. A little disclaimer ahead, this is not going to be purely positive, I'm also going to look at the cons, at the downsides of the recent developments, so we have an overall picture of what's going on with Sea of Thieves. So let's get started on how everything changed. There were two major events happening around the same time that formed this symbiosis between Sea of Thieves and Summit. Sea of Thieves had just released an update on the 28th of November, which was called Shrouded Spoils and added some new features to the game, for example, added fog as well as mega kegs and all kinds of stuff to make the game a bit more exciting. On that very same day and the days prior to that, Summit had been talking about how his current streaming plan, so to speak, was kind of boring him. He was primarily playing Call of Duty Black Ops 4 at the time, and he was pretty fed up with it. He didn't really seem to enjoy playing the game and expressed this and just played it for content, and his viewers didn't enjoy watching either. As such, he was ending up with numbers like 8,600 viewers, which for many is a big number, but for a streamer that is as big as Summit, really isn't all too impressive. Summit even went as far as making a tweet about this, saying that he was getting super bored streaming and was asking for other games to play. In the replies, the user Kyle Gibson actually proposed that Summit should play Sea of Thieves again and actually got quite a few likes for that. So, the very next day, Summit came onto the stream, and that was the same day that Shrouded Spoils was released, and he announced that among some other games, he wanted to play some Sea of Thieves. His plan was this.
Me and Smokey are just like, yo man, you wanna just fucking go out and sail the seas for a little while, you know? This could last like 20 minutes for all we know.
And you probably guessed it, that lasted a while longer. On that day, he played Sea of Thieves for roughly 2 to 3 hours, but he kept playing it throughout the next days, and he kept going back to it, and his stream really enjoyed watching it. And this absolutely showed in his numbers. Remember how I told you he had 8,600 on Black Ops at one point? Now his average views for this month are up to 35,000, which is a 100% increase from the last 30 days. And make no mistake, this is absolutely from Sea of Thieves. You can actually look at his statistics here. He has his highest average viewers on Sea of Thieves, even though he's only been playing it for 2 months at the moment. So it most definitely is a game that people enjoy watching him, and that's for a very good reason. Of course, a big part of that is that Summit actually enjoys playing the game. He said that he's addicted to the game in December already, very early in December. So he has been enjoying this game after being stuck with games that he was more playing to keep his viewers entertained and not having fun himself. Well, now he is having fun. And he is having fun through a unique playstyle. Around the time Summit started playing, a lot of the playstyles in Sea of Thieves were very much focused around PvE and just farming as quickly as possible, to the point where many players try to go into private discords and then set up a PvE servers with some tricks where everyone would be in an alliance and no one would actually fight and everyone would just try and grind chests or whatever as quickly as possible. To many, this kind of defeats the purpose of Sea of Thieves and the whole idea of it, and obviously it also accelerates the rate at which people progress in the game, eventually running out of things to do or getting bored because there's just no risk in doing what they're doing. Summit kind of took on the whole game with a different take. His goal was to do heists and play more PvP focused, try to go on enemies' ships, take them out maybe once or twice, hide somewhere on the ship, and then steal their loot when they have something that's worth stealing. This would sometimes result in his character sleeping in a bunch of barrels for half an hour just so he wouldn't get seen, which maybe technically isn't the most effective or efficient way to play the game, but it was certainly fun then after that half an hour to see him sneak away with all their loot on a rowboat. He also tried to do this on the PvE servers to get more loot out of pirates that feel particularly safe, thinking there are no PvP focused players on their server, and then get away with their loot. So this whole playstyle brought a lot of entertainment to everyone watching because it was something different from the usual, and it kind of changed up the grind a little bit, and the reactions from people that were being attacked were obviously very funny as well. And this is where the synergy was created. Summit had a lot of fun and showed new ways to play the game, The game got more and more attention and got a good update at the same time, so a lot more people were willing to try the game out and a lot more people were paying attention to the game. So many people, in fact, that today we have quite a few big streamers outside of Summit also trying out the game. We had, for example, Dr. Disrespect playing it, or we had Ninja playing it, we had Tim the Tatman playing it. And this to a point that Sea of Thieves actually ended up being the most watched game on Twitch on a specific time or a specific day. Now, obviously you can call this bandwagoning and you wouldn't be wrong. Streamers often play successful games because then they know their audience will probably be following them and they will also be likely to find new people watching them there. So it's a logical decision for them to do that. But at the end of the day, the reasons don't matter as much as the fact that the game is getting a large amount of new viewers and is often much higher on Twitch and therefore is getting a lot more attention and a lot of new players. And the interesting thing is that many of these new players actually have a very different playstyle, often not coming from a background of, for example, RPG or any exploration games, but rather shooters, because many of these streamers mainly have their audiences in shooters. And that is especially interesting because they also bring new playstyles to Sea of Thieves. That also comes with some new problems, but we'll talk about those in a bit. For now, let's move away a little bit from the streaming perspective and look more at what the game has to offer at this point. Because again, Summit has a very unique playstyle, playing the game differently, but what about everyone else who's just playing it like before and is exploring the game? Because if everyone just tried to steal from each other, then there would be no one left to steal from. So of course, there have been changes to Sea of Thieves over the year. One Twitter user summarized a whole bunch of them. Roaming skeleton galleons that are passive unless they spawn on you or you shoot, 6 different megalodons, all 9 forts active and rotate, countless ways to get gold easier and reach legend, and so much more. Now is the time to sail. Bit of a sales pitch here, but the question is, are those really big changes? I took another look at the game for quite a few hours now to get a feel for how everything is now, and I gotta be honest, I personally don't think that much has changed. Yes, there are changes. There is, for example, a completely new area on the map, a volcanic area, which is nice with the different visuals, and it also has some different interactions. The geysers that knock you up, there is a volcano that can hit you with its fire and then your ship can go down, and all kinds of other tiny things that have changed. But the bigger picture of the gameplay, to me personally, remained mostly the same. I want to tell you some of the changes that have been made. For example, merchant quests have been overhauled in general, and that's a very nice thing because the previous iteration of them was just annoying. Barrels now have loot in them. We have some new enemy variations that spawn a little bit more frequently. There are some cosmetic upgrades, some that you can unlock through various things. And there are also some quest lines, I guess, to some degree, where you can kind of trace back what happened to some pirates, etc. So there are things to do here and there, some things in context of some events, and some of the events aren't active anymore, but it's not like you just sit around and do nothing. But I will say that right now, and the emphasis here is on right now, we'll get into why this may not count soon anymore in a bit, a lot of the things really haven't changed all that much. You still spend a large amount of time simply sailing the seas, slightly adjusting your sails and waiting. And that, I think, was one of the core issues when the game was released, and I'm surprised it hasn't been tackled more. For example, in regards to the enemies, our main enemies, almost all the time, are still skeletons. On ships now sometimes, which is cool, otherwise on land. Technically you count snakes to the enemies, I guess, and you have sharks if you are in the water for too long, which spawn a little less now, which is nice. But there are very few other enemies. The bosses in the game, so to speak, are skeleton ships, which are just ships with skeletons on them, which are fun to play, don't get me wrong, but the concept also isn't super different from everything else. You have the Mag and you have the Kraken. The Mag and the Kraken, as far as I know, are still mostly random encounters, and both of them are only ship combat. And I really think there's a lot of room to expand on that. I think especially more complex enemies are something that would be so cool for this game. Raid bosses like in other games, not necessarily for raids, maybe just for 4 players, but that have certain mechanics that you have to properly utilize, like certain weak points and damage immunity in other points. certain things that you have to activate in certain areas to properly fight a boss, that kind of stuff. I wish there was some more depth to the combat, maybe outside of what you can do on a ship as well. And that seems to be very limited still. Likewise, the random encounters on the sea are just that, random. You can't force fights on the sea with any of those bosses, so you can't just be like, I want to fight, give me a fight. At the same time, you may end up getting a fight when you least want it and if you're just about to close out the game. As such, there's still a lot of time where you wish you had something to do and you don't. It helps when you sail with a crew here with 4 people, and it's a more entertaining feeling then, because playing with 4 people is generally more entertaining. But even then, if you've played the game for a while like I did, then you might run out of things to do. For a game that is heavily focused on the interaction between players, there is very little that you can actually do in terms of interaction with players. There have been propositions for fishing, just to have something to do on the ship. There have been people saying there should be something like dice games, card games, anything you can play with the other players while you're just sailing around and waiting. None of that has happened. You can basically get drunk on your ship and wait. Even if Rare didn't want to implement any new mechanics, they could just take existing ones. They could implement a duel function for your teammates so you can duel each other and just practice your sword fighting that way. It would be a super cool thing to have something to do and something that would keep you busy for a long time, but even almost a year later, that hasn't been integrated in the game, and I'm not the first one to propose this either. That may be one of the parts that bothers me the most, considering I really would like to practice combat, outside of the fact that right now we have a little bit of abuse going on with the gun swaps. I understand that Sea of Thieves wants to be the sandbox concept that allows you to create your own adventure, but I feel like even now it's still not really giving you all the tools to do this, and the adventures that you can create are very restricted. Don't get me wrong, I think Sea of Thieves is a great game for anyone jumping into it for the first time. But I also know that people who've been playing for a long time are more likely to not really find that much value in the changes, and I know that some of my friends who've been playing for a long time eventually jumped off as well because they felt like there wasn't really anything new coming. There is something new coming with a change in February though, a patch in February rather, which may actually change a lot of things. Before that we have a quick fix that will balance weapons more so that the double gun glitch doesn't function anymore, where you could basically quick swap weapons and not have to re-aim your weapon at all. But the big changes will be happening with the arena change. The arena will be a separate mode with a smaller map as far as I understand it, as far as it sounds like that, where combat is a lot more forced. Now the goal of the mode is not specifically to have PvP only, it's about a new faction, the Sea Dog faction, that you can get your points with and that you can queue into at any point. But your goal here will be treasure hunting. And you will be farming treasures all around the islands, but you can obviously also steal treasures from the other pirates. So with the area looking rather small so far, it's very, very likely that you will just run into enemies very often and you will often have fights over the loot. And it will test your combat skills a lot more and have a lot less downtime, especially when it comes to just sailing around. And I hope this will be executed in a way that makes that possible and makes that very interesting. I will definitely give Sea of Thieves another go when the arena comes out, because I really want to see how it ends up being. Before I go, I also wanted to quickly let you know that at the moment Sea of Thieves is on sale for 50% off, so for 30 bucks, which still isn't super cheap for a game that is not that new anymore, but if you want to look at it, that's one option. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting, insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to smash that subscribe button, and on that, see you for the next one tomorrow or the day after. DukeSloth, out.